This is the start of a series of videos in this playlist called Bergson's Philosophy, or whatever I'm going to call it. I haven't made it yet, but I'm making videos about Henri Bergson's philosophy. I'm choosing to start videos on Bergson's Mind Energy, which is a collection of essays or lectures, which happened later in his writing. A more important work might be a better place to start, I would think. But in my opinion, there's a lot of really good concepts in here which are a part of his philosophy and a part of what he discusses. So, mind energy. The first chapter is really what I want to discuss here. This is an old book. It's a library book because I do not own mind energy, but I own Time and Free Will and Creative Evolution. But I would like to. I've read this book probably twice. This exact book, I've probably checked it out maybe twice, and I read it the other time. One of the times I read the whole thing, and I've also read this book, Bergsonism by Gilles Deleuze, which is also a very good resource on that. A better resource to hear about Bergson than Derrida or Foucault. My opinion. You want to hear about? I don't know. I just think Bergson is overlooked too much. That's just what I say. The first chapter is called Life and Consciousness. It's the Huxley lecture delivered in 1911 at the University of Birmingham. So, a few things I want to discuss here. And first of all, I want to discuss what a line of fact is. Lines of facts. Essentially, a line of fact is a group of facts, but it has a direction towards something. It has a direction towards a certain thing here. I'll read the part where he discusses the line of facts. And it is still more to have several, for these directions will naturally converge towards one and the same point, and it is that the point we are seeking. In short, we possess even now a certain number of lines of facts which do not go as far as we want, but which we can prolong hypothetically. I wish to follow out some of these with you. It's a group of factual things. It's a group, but it's directional. It's directional towards a certain point, and then lines of facts which are around a certain, or concentrated around a certain thing, are directed towards the same point. This isn't to say that everything that is in life is directed towards a certain telos, or it's determined by a certain telos in the future, but this little diagram here is what lines of facts look like, and they're directed towards the same point. These are a few lines of facts that are directed towards the same point. They're all directional. That's a certain thing to think about here, what a line of fact is. And he's talking about this with respect to figuring out and being knowledgeable or being certain about certain things. He mentions that briefly in this chapter. And it leads one to a certain idea about what he thinks, or a certain opinion, or I guess more would probably be better to say theory, because if I believe that's what he says. And so it's about these lines of facts are more about knowledge and getting towards, where we're going, I guess. Oh yeah, here he says, it would be impossible to explain a philosopher's attachments to to so strange a method had the threefold advantage that it flatters his self-esteem, facilitates his work, and gives him the illusion of definitive knowledge. As it leads him to some very general theory, to an almost empty concept, he can always later on place retrospectively in the concept whatever experience has come to teach him of a thing. He will then claim to have anticipated experience by the force of reasoning alone, to have embraced beforehand in a wider conception of those conceptions, narrower, confess but the only ones difficult to form, and the only ones useful to keep, which we get by the study of facts. On the other hand, as nothing is easier than to reason geometrically with abstract ideas, he has no trouble in constructing an iron-bound system, which appears to be strong because it is unbending. Just a little note here. That's all. That's not the main thing I want to discuss here. First of all, he talks about memory on page 5. Lines of facts are on page 3 and 4. These memory. It's about memory here. He does discuss it. The first line or direction which I invite you to follow is this. He's a line or direction towards a certain theory or point. That's kind of the structure of how he's going to come towards being knowledgeable or being certain about a certain thing. So it's similar to a structure of knowledge, if you want to call it that. He asks, what is consciousness? And then he will say, he will not give a definition, but he says it means memory. And memory, he says memory is there, or there is no consciousness. And through memory, he comes to temporal relations, which is very, very interesting. And he comes to conceive of consciousness, therefore, as temporal, and its relations to things as temporal relations. He calls it a bridge, really. Memory and anticipation. It's similar to Edmund Husserl's phenomenology of the consciousness of internal time, of retentions and recollections, and reproductions of primary remembrances and secondary remembrances, all that past stuff, versus protensions. But it's all past continua and future continua, or protensions. We have one line in the middle of primary impressions or imminent temporary objects, temporal objects. And we have these two things here, but how are they linked? But all consciousness is also anticipation of the future. Consider the direction of your mind at any moment you like to choose. You'll find that it is occupied with what now is. And it is here where it's somewhat similar to what Derrida says when in reference to Husserl. He says the present is gonna slip away. He doesn't use that word. I'm gonna come to it. Future is there. It calls us, rather it draws us to it. Its uninterrupted fraction makes us advance along the route of time and requires us to be continually acting. For consciousness, there is no present. If the present to be a mathematical instant, in order to reply to the question, let us inquire what beings are conscious and how far in nature the domain of consciousness extends. Basically, what goes on here is memory is equated with consciousness. If consciousness means memory and anticipation, it is because consciousness is synonymous with choice. Now, I'm just going to go over that here, what that means. Memory and anticipation. Memory is past because it's consciousness with respect to things that have previously occurred, anticipation is consciousness with respect to things that could possibly occur, or might occur, or will occur. And he says in this book that no one can be conscious of the present. The present is juxtaposed with past and future. And consciousness, however, is the bridge between past and future, between memory and anticipation. This is cool. Sam Adams cream stout, pretty good. So what does this mean? Consciousness is memory. Consciousness is anticipation. And then it is here where he talks about how if one has a brain, then one must be conscious, but it is not necessary to be conscious. Or, I mean, it is not necessary that we have a brain to be conscious. Where did he say? And it's somewhat of a intentional, somewhat of a likening of Husserl's intentional consciousness, that is, consciousness of something. In the like manner, consciousness in man is unquestionably concerned with the brain, but by no means it follows that a brain is indispensable to consciousness. So, he's very psychological. He talks about how consciousness is related to what's going on in here. It's about what's going on in here as well. The spinal cord and the cerebrum and such have a part in us being conscious, and that leads to us having choice. Okay, let's see here. When the stimulus then, instead of following the direct path, goes off to the brain, it is evidently in order that it may set in action a motor mechanism which has been chosen, instead of which one is automatic. So consciousness and the brain correlates that may or may not be there, but for the higher order beings, it is there. The brain is an organ of choice. A brain is not if in a being that has a brain, it's not a automaton. It's not automatic. With consciousness and memory and anticipation, that temporal bridge, and thus we have the brain correlates. Thus we have choice. We have, with consciousness, with being conscious of something, we have the faculty of choosing. It is first localized in the brain and extends gradually to the spinal cord, which then probably constructs somewhat fewer mechanisms and also mounts with less precision. At last, when we come to the nervous system, which is rudimentary, still more when distinct nervous elements have disappeared altogether, automatism and choice are fused into one. The reaction is now so simple that it appears almost mechanical. It still hesitates and gropes, however, as though it would be voluntary. So the amoeba, for one, doesn't have to. It could possibly automaton. It's not automatic. With consciousness and memory and anticipation, that temporal bridge, and thus we have the brain correlates. Thus we have choice. We have, with consciousness, with being conscious of something, we have the faculty of choosing. It is first localized in the brain and extends gradually to the spinal cord, which then probably constructs somewhat fewer mechanisms and also mounts with less precision. At last, when we come to the nervous system, which is rudimentary, still more when distinct nervous elements have disappeared altogether, automatism and choice are fused into one. The reaction is not so simple that it appears almost mechanical. It still hesitates and gropes, however, as though it would be voluntary. So the amoeba, for one, doesn't have to. It could possibly, be conscious, but it doesn't have a brain. Consciousness retains the past and anticipates the future. It's probably because it is called on to make a choice. And this kind of also relates to Heidegger because, being as care, Zorga, a concern for things in the world, is the thing that divides present, future, and its past. The relation in Martin Heidegger's Being in Time between past, future, and present is given. It's really distinctly related to care and concern. Zorga. So consciousness in its temporal thing. So temporality, is a part of care for Heidegger, and in Husserl, the same follows. Or the same doesn't really follow because, Husserl's or Heidegger's idea of time, is influenced by Husserl, but I would say it's more blatant in Husserl than about care. Zorga. It does have a relation to what one is doing and what one cares about, but more so in Heidegger. And this is a big thing here because the same thing follows. The same thing is it's not in no way the same, but it's very, very similar here. This idea of temporality and consciousness. And that means that one must have the ability to do something different, to be creative, to be a part of creative things, and not be automatic. Consciousness retains the past and anticipates the future. It's probably because it's called on to make a choice. And then he says, if consciousness means memory and anticipation, it is because consciousness is synonymous with choice. So, if one is conscious, one is conscious of things, then one must have choice. And then he talks about dormant consciousness. Even in the vegetable world, where the organism is generally fixed in the soil, the faculty of movement is dormant rather than absent. It awakens when it can be of use. I believe all living beings, plants, and animals possess it in right, but many of them have renounced it in fact. Some animals, especially those which have become parasitic on other organisms, kind of like in reference to maybe like a tick or one of those fish things that will leech onto a shark or a whale shark or a whale, kind of like that, and have no need of moving about to find their nourishment. And the vast majority of plants has not been said that plants are earth parasites. So if they have no need to nourish themselves, they have no need for whatever for their self-improvement or to improve their life or whatever, then they cease to be conscious and they have dormant consciousness, and thus they no longer have choice. What else do I want to discuss here? 28. He talks about duration here, and ultimately, he's dualistic. Bergson is very dualistic. It's about life and matter. Those are the two things that coincide with each other, and the struggle is to break away from matter and to creatively be active in order and break that, because matter, in a sense, is going to bring you downward. He talks about tension, the tension of duration. He talks about duration. In other words, isn't the tension of the duration of the conscious being the measure of its power of acting? So he discusses that. He talks about how life evolves. The matter is the inverse of consciousness. If consciousness is action, unceasingly creating and enriching itself, the idea of enriching oneself is something that it can occur with consciousness. Whilst matter is action continually unmaking itself or using itself up, then neither matter nor consciousness can be explained apart from one another. So it's very dualistic, and it's just so cool, I think. And then he talks about the evolution of life. Even a cursory survey of the evolution of life gives us the feeling that this impulse is a reality. Yet we must not think that it has driven living matter in one single direction, nor that the different species represent so many stages along a single route, nor that the course has been accomplished without obstacle. So, goes back to that line of facts thing. It's not directing in one certain, creative activity. It's not directing in one sort of certain way, because that wouldn't be creative. It is clear that the effort has met with resistance in the matter, which it has had to make use of. It has needed to split itself up to distribute along the lines of evolution the tendencies it bore within it. It has turned aside. It has retrograded. At times it has stopped short. What else did I want to do? And he does really discuss a lot of dualities here. A lot of his basic things here are discussed. And then he talks about joy with creation. Creation is from the way I've been taught about it, it's merely a creation of a new thing out of creative activity. It's a breaking the matter, it's a philosophy it's a change thing. It's a philosophy of movement. It's a life force that's trying to break the matter. And if a new thing is created, that's creation, and that it's, different from something that is, of matter and automatic. And then he discusses joy. Joy isn't the finalistic way of evolution. It's more about success, in that a certain telos within the origin of a evolution that is creative, is finally achieved. It's not in that finalistic sense. What else would I do? The aspirations of our moral nature are none the least contradicted by positive science. On this, as many other points, I quite agree with the opinion of mental activity of man overflows his cerebral activity, that his brain is a storehouse of motor habits, but not of memories, that the other functions of thought are even more independent of the brain than memory is, that preservation and the intensification of personality are not only possible, but even probable. What else here? Let us confess our ignorance, but let us not resign ourselves to the belief that we can never know. If there's a beyond for conscious beings, I cannot say why we should not be able to discover the means and explore it. That's the breaking of the certain things and being more creative. That's a bad way of saying it, though. Nothing which concerns man is likely to conceal itself deliberately from the eyes of man. Sometimes, moreover, the information we imagine to be far off, even infinitely distant, is at our side, waiting only till it pleases us to notice it. Recollect what has happened in regard to another beyond. So that life is still a life of striving, a need of invention, a creative evolution. To each of us, it might come by the play of natural forces alone, taking our place on the moral plane in which this life and quality and quantity of our effort had already virtually raised us. As the balloon set free takes the position of the air in which its density assigns it. So he discusses also the life beyond. If we can get to a certain life beyond, then we should. Struggling among themselves and the thing. Anyway, this part was basically kind of a primer, I would say, to his philosophy, but it's a lot about creative evolution, really, and it's about what this dualistic connection means, what consciousness means, and such. Probably can continue with the second chapter of this in a different video, which is about soul and body.